Good evening. Oh, that's loud. Hello. I love all the energy in the room tonight for tonight's school board meeting. Welcome Thursday, November 21st at 6 p.m. We're getting started for the MSAD 51 school board meeting. Looks like we have a full slate of school board members here, and we get to kick it off with some exciting recognition. Top of the agenda is our championship soccer teams. I think this is the first time in school history both the boys and the girls soccer teams have won state championship. And so I get to welcome Ann Graham and Steve Moriarty, our representatives, to give a legislative sentiment.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Good evening, everybody. For the next 2 weeks, I am Representative Steve Moriarty, and at the end of that time, I will cease to have that title, but I'll still be here. This is an exciting time for the Greeley sports program and the Greeley community at large. 3 state championships in a single sports season is a remarkable accomplishment and speaks so highly of the school, the coaches, the parents, and obviously the players. And there are 2 sports seasons left to go in this academic year, so who knows what lies in store for us. Many of you have seen Representative Graham and I go through this routine. It is an exercise in pure celebration and congratulations. We present so-called sentiments from the legislature to the coaches and the team members in a document that can be proudly displayed to congratulate them and recognize their accomplishment. And some of you could probably recite the language of these sentiments from memory. There is a protocol that the state follows, so we can't vary it too much, unfortunately, but we won't worry too much about that. So I have the honor of making the presentation to the girls soccer team this evening. And a sentiment is a formal recognition of congratulations from the legislature. And it reads as follows: State of Maine, be it known to all that we, the members of the Senate and the House of Representatives, join in recognizing the Greeley High School girls soccer team of Cumberland, which won the Class B state championship. We extend our congratulations and best wishes, and be it ordered that this official expression of sentiment be sent forthwith on behalf of the 131st Legislature and the people of the state of Maine. This is dated November 14, 2024, just a week ago, signed by the presiding officers of the Senate and the House of Representatives, and is jointly presented tonight by Representative Graham, Senator Teresa Peirce, and by myself. I understand that there may be a willing, not to say semi-willing, representative of the team to accept the sentiment and perhaps share a few words with all of us.
And the whole team will join her up there.
Ah, great, great.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hi, I'm Abby Lennox. I was a senior captain on the team this year, and winning states obviously means the world to all of us. It's an incredibly great opportunity. Lots of memories were made this year, and I'm just so proud of our entire team and all we've accomplished and all the team has for possibilities in the future. And to win it with the boys too means the world. So, yeah. Woo!
So I asked Steve, who has been the one that's done all these sentiments. He's the one that's gotten the hard work done. He just said, Andy, just come along. But I basically said, please, please, please let me do this. Because you know, this is my team. Well, make believe I'm Coach Graham, who is actually off coaching soccer for future players. So yeah, and so I just wanted to say, congratulations, you guys, just rock. Your picture is on my husband's laptop, desktop, like all the time. So I see you all the time. You did an awesome job. And the last time this happened was when my youngest son, who's now 26, was a freshman at Greeley. So way awesome, been there. But I really wanted to point out something that we don't acknowledge enough, and that's Coach Andreessen. Coach, you've been our coach for 33 years. Awesome. And may I say that one of Ron's players' moms called me Coach Mom once. I'm not Coach Mom. Kim Andreessen is Coach Mom. I think she has attended every single game of those 33 years. And so she's not here right now, but please let's give her a round of applause. And lastly, I just want to say I am super proud of my coach husband and 22 years coaching with Mike, but also all the assistant coaches. People step up. They want to coach here because you guys are awesome. Mike is an incredible coach, and this is a great system. The community supports our kids so well. So with that, I will do the formal thing. So, State of Maine, be it known to all that we, the members of the Senate and House of Representatives, join in recognizing the Greeley High School boys soccer team of Cumberland and North Yarmouth, which won the Class B state championship. We extend our congratulations and best wishes. And be it ordered that this official expression of sentiment be sent forthwith on behalf of the 131st Legislature and the people of the state of Maine. Signed by the presiding officers of the House and the Senate, and sponsored by Representative Moriarty, Senator Pierce, and myself with great pride.
Yeah, you got it.
We greatly appreciate all your recognition, and I just want to take a moment to speak on all the people who have put us in the position to succeed. To the coaches, to the parents, the boosters, and all the fans, we really do appreciate all your support, and you guys really mean the world to us, so thank you all.
And thank you. This was such a great way for us to kick off tonight's meeting. We really appreciate you coming out and us being able to celebrate all your accomplishments. So thank you. Certainly make Greeley proud. Yeah. I mean, you're welcome to stay. So next up on the recognition was to highlight our drama program, but it is the night before opening of Mamma Mia, and I know they are very busy over in the GCA at the moment. So if you haven't gotten your tickets, opening night is tomorrow for the Greeley Drama Program, putting on Mamma Mia. I think they're 80% sold. So if you haven't got your tickets yet, there are 4 shows tomorrow evening, 2 matinees, Saturday and Sunday, and then also a Saturday evening show. So we may end up seeing them if they're able to come over to the meeting, but I think we'll have to move on for tonight. And we also have Monty Selby, who is on the agenda to present GMS highlights, who unfortunately is out sick this week. So now we're going to move to approval of minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the November 7th meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Jesse. Can I have a second?
Second.
Oh. We'll go with Shad. Okay. Any comments or questions on the meeting minutes, corrections? All right. All in favor? Thank you. All approved. Okay, now we're going to open up for public comment. The board welcomes and recognizes the value of public comment, and to ensure public comment is fair and orderly, we follow procedures outlined in our board policy BEDH, and we ask that all members of the public do so as well. We follow this policy to help keep the meeting civil, respectful, and productive. We also hope that this allows for all community members who would like to speak to be heard. We ask the speakers use the designated podium when making their comments and speak into the microphone. If you're interested in speaking, please wait till you're recognized by myself, the chair. Comments by individuals are limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. A clock is visible on the screen to help keep track of time. Please state your name and town of residence before beginning your remarks. As a reminder, public comment is not a time for discussion, Q&A, or debate between the board and speakers. Rather, is a time for members of the public to express their opinions on school and educational matters. Please know that this does not mean we're not listening and does not express any agreement or disagreement with your statements. Lastly, please keep comments respectful and civil, and we also ask that all comments be addressed to myself, the chair, and please do not direct comments at or about individuals in our schools and communities. So I'd like to welcome anybody here for public comment to the podium. Hi, Bruce.
Stressful with so much to say in only 3 minutes. Bruce Sherwin, Cumberland. I've been doing a lot of research. I've researched all the minutes since January 1st of this year. I've watched a couple of videos, March 18th and April 1st, and I have come to the strong conclusion that the referendum for the school that included the turf was not done in the best interest of constituents. It was done in the best instance of the school board members. If you watch the March 18th video and the April 1st, you will see that Mr. Valente brought up
All comments should be directed to me and not about other members of the
I can talk
board.
about other people. I'm talking to you, but about him. That's
well,
okay.
We try not to talk about individuals.
Well, there was a council member that brought up the option of separating the turf and the school and the Mabel I. Wilson stuff with the school, and that was more in the constituents' interests. The rest of the council didn't even talk about it. All they talked about was each one talked about how much they like artificial turf. There was no argument made against that school board member. That school board member brought it up, attempted to make a motion of it on April 1st, and couldn't even get a second. So it was not discussed again. I expect more from our school board. We need to be able to trust our school board to make decisions on constituents' behalf. Now, a referendum like this is much different than normal business for a school board. Normal business for a school board is overseeing the operation of the school. Referendums, buying capital assets, doing budgets is not normal business of the school. It requires constituent interest, paying attention to constituents and what their interests are, and giving them a vote on the issue. I'm a little disturbed that there was a vote or a survey done of students in school about the artificial turf, but we couldn't do a survey of voters. That doesn't work. I'm also disturbed, I found in the minutes, the half-acre piece of land that was purchased was supposed to come to public referendum, if you read the minutes of February 12th. That did not happen. That should have been a referendum item also. Very disappointed. And I want to eliminate Jesse, Lorraine Vincent, Sean Thurston, and Sarah Rose because they were not on that school board. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak for public comment? Okay, I'd like to close public comment. Now we're going to move on to presentations. I'd like to invite Kim McDonald and Taylor Poulin, great, to present on the French exchange trip.
Hello, I'm Taylor Poulin. I'm one of the French teachers at the high school, along with.
And I'm Madame McDonald, another French teacher at the high school.
So this is different than our big group exchange that we have done in the past. This is a continuation of a project or a partnership with a high school in southwestern France, the Lycée Émile Roux. So just a bit of background and context. In 2022, Greeley High School was contacted by Adam Leff at Gould Academy, and he asked us if we would be interested in participating in an exchange program funded by the French education system, where one Greeley student would spend time at a French high school and one French student would spend time at Greeley High School. So we were contacted by Adam Leff about that opportunity. In 2022, I started a partnership between Greeley and said high school, Émile Roux, where our students shared videos on a platform called Padlet. This year and last year as well, we continued this relationship with my freshmen and juniors. I'm working specifically with a teacher named Delphine Gavinet, our contact at the school, and she is a science teacher. Last school year, 2023-2024, Greeley and Émile Roux were awarded the funds from the French government to send one student and teacher to France. We successfully participated in a 6-week one-on-one exchange program with a junior from Greeley and a junior from Émile Roux. Through this immersion experience, students progressed exponentially in their French language abilities. It was a success. This current school year, we plan to continue this one-on-one exchange, only without government funding. The participating families have agreed to pay for all travel and insurance. The Greeley family has expressed interest in this experience since last year, and they agreed to host their French exchange partner for 6 weeks. The Greeley student will in turn travel to Confinement for date to be determined with the school counselors and all families involved. It is important to note that I had advertised this experience to all students taking French with the ability to apply to the program, and this one family has applied.
Great. Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
So with the absence of the government funding in this case, how would you say, other than the financial responsibility for the families, does that change the role for the district or the relationship?
That's a good question. I'm going to turn it over to Kim because we have done this sort of one-on-one exchange in the past, and she knows more about that.
Great, thank you.
So as far as the funding, the government grant goes, that was paying for the travel only, and the families had to supply their insurance. And in most cases, I think there's a supplemental insurance that the families need to purchase. So as far as the role of the district goes, because it is one of our students and it is international travel, we're bringing it to the board for your approval. In the past, before this, I think the policy had changed that any international travel had to be run by the board. We had done summer exchanges where a student would come from France and stay with a family, and our students would go there and stay with those families. So those are the relationships that we have been doing over the years. But now it is happening in the school year, which makes it a little bit different. We're hosting in the schools, and they're attending classes. So for that reason, I think it's appropriate that we ask for your approval in that. But so it's that they're attending school, they're in our schools, so that's our liability as a district. But other than the funding, it doesn't change.
Other questions? So I do know we have an item for action later on. Is there a motion to move that up in the agenda?
So moved.
Can I get a second? Great. Second. I'll approve to move it up. I guess that's my initial. So I'll approve to move it up. Okay. So unanimous on that. And would somebody like to actually make the motion for the item?
I will, wait a minute, I have to find it. Okay, I move to approve the French exchange trip request.
Second.
Thank you, Megan. All in favor? Great. So moved. Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And thank you for continuing to support programs like this for our students. Okay. Mari Treblecock, come on up. 2023-24 assessment report.
Hi, everybody. Looks like it's right there. Okay, hang on one second. Okay. All right. So this evening I'm here to talk to you about our assessments. So our goals for tonight are to understand our universal assessments that we use in MSAD 51, how and why we use them, and when they're administered, hopefully to give you a little bit of background on that, and then to understand our data, how are our students doing in the district, and then finally to understand what steps are being taken to address areas of need highlighted in our data that I'm going to share with you this evening. So those are the goals. And I'd like to start with what our state required assessments are. We have state required assessments, and then we also have assessments that we choose to give universally to our students. And they serve different purposes for us. So I plan to talk a little bit about those different purposes to clarify. So let's start with what's required. So the Maine Department of Education requires testing in fall and spring in both reading and math for grades 3 through 8 and 10, and in 5th, 8th, and 11th grade in science. The state uses the Maine through-year assessment as the accountability measure for accessing federal funding. They require 95% participation rate. If we drop below that participation rate, then we risk losing federal funding, so that's an important threshold. And the fall test is different from the spring test. It's fully adaptive across academic levels. And so students will answer questions until they're getting 50% correct and 50% incorrect, and that yields an instructional level for the students. In the spring, it's different. In the spring, 1/3 of the assessment is adaptive in the manner that I just described. And then 2/3 of the questions are standards aligned and adapt 1 grade level up or 1 grade level down. And that yields a Maine specific scaled score. And so the fall and spring Maine through year assessments really are not comparable to each other. For that reason, they're actually 2 different assessments that are being given to the students. And so we're not able to measure growth with that. And that's an important thing to kind of tuck away in the back of your head. We are required to give this assessment both fall and spring, but only the spring assessment counts for accountability, okay? The Maine Science Assessment is not an adaptive assessment. It's a static assessment, very much like a pencil and paper assessment that kids would have taken 15 or 20 years ago, but it's taken on a computer. And that test takes about 50 to 60 minutes per session, and there are 3 sessions on that assessment. So it's really about a 3-hour test that is spread out over multiple days in most cases. Okay, so another detail, the Department of Education is in the process of accepting RFPs for a new vendor for the state assessment. And so the Maine through year may or may not be the assessment of the future. We'll see. That's the contract is just running out, and so they're in the process of re-upping that. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so how do we use this data? For the Maine through year, we received our spring data in September. For the Maine science assessment, it came to us in mid-October. This makes using the data to inform instruction at a granular level pretty difficult, if not impossible. It's simply too late coming to us. It's the following school year, and so acting for individual students becomes quite challenging. So that being said, though, we are able to use state assessment data to examine our curriculum over time, consider implications at scale. For example, our middle school data over time indicated that we had some curriculum issues in math. We knew that our curriculum wasn't well aligned to the state standards, and so last year we shifted to our new Into Math HMH curriculum in grades 6 through 8. That's just one example of how we use the data to inform our practices. So then we have universal assessments that we do internally. Because our state assessments are limited to some degree to large-scale curriculum analysis, and because we need more timely data to address individual student skill deficits through our multi-tiered systems of support, we rely on universal assessments that we do to inform decisions that we make. So you might recall that multi-tiered systems of support, when I was here couple months ago, or MTSS, is a framework of 3 tiers for meeting the needs of learners in our schools. So tier 1, that base level, is regular classroom instruction for all. Tier 2 is small group targeted instruction for some. Tier 3 is individualized, targeted, intensive instruction for few. Okay, and so we use these assessments to help identify who needs help and what they need help with. So here goes. So we use iReady universally in grades K through 8, and this is given twice a year in fall and spring, and this is the same assessment. It's comparable fall to spring, so we are able to see growth in students, and that's the important distinction. We give this assessment also because it's criterion referenced or referenced against standards, as opposed to norm referenced against other test takers nationally, to know how kids are performing against grade level expectations. And so the data gives us a better idea of how they're actually doing academically. And so you'll see when I start to show you the data that this data, the iReady data, looks a little lower than the Maine through year data. And to me, that's okay, because we're really using this intentionally to program for students. And so I'd rather have it be accurate for where kids are against standards than use something that maybe isn't as clear in terms of where our students actually are for decision making about individual programming. Okay, so how are our kids doing? Let's take a look. So we're going to start with iReady, and remember that this is compared to standards on the assessment in math and reading, and we're looking at end of year data tonight over time. Because I think that gives the best glimpse, the snapshot of where we are in time and space year over year. So before jumping into what each of these charts tells us, a couple of key points that I want to make for you. The bars here represent the total percentage of students on grade level at the end of the year. The nuance is that the dark red represents students who are at mid-grade level or above grade level at the end of the school year. The pink represents students who are early on grade level at the end of the year. So while they're on grade level, they're not securely there, okay? And so we shouldn't be complacent about their performance, right? So you have the total amount. If you look at 23-24 at Wilson School, 82% of our students were on grade level at the end of the year. 61% were securely there, 21% are there, but we got to pay attention to it. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so you can see that the iReady spring achievement levels at the Wilson School have a gradual increase in performance since the 2021 school year, and we still have some work to do. This is GMS 4.5, and my story here is that the math data jumped in 21-22 and has remained fairly flat since then. And then at GMS 6.8, there's a gradual increase over time, but it's slow going. And it's important to note that the 23-24 school year represents year one of implementation of a new math curriculum. And so that was in response to relatively flat achievement over time.
Maury, can you just remind me, 2021 was our hybrid year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so here we are with reading. So at the Wilson School, you can see relatively flat performance in iReady reading over time. The good news is that we aim for 80% of students to be meeting standards in the Tier 1 setting, in the core curriculum. And our data shows us that we're there. We're at 80% or better. Having 80% of our kids' needs met there lowers the number of students who need interventions, and that allows us to be more effective in providing interventions. If we have less than 80% of our students meeting standards in Tier 1, then it's a little bit like whack-a-mole in Tier 2 and Tier 3, right? And you're not able to give kids what they need because there are just too many students with diverse needs to address well. So this is actually a reasonably good shape here. GMS 4.5, the results are flat and below the 80% that we're looking for. Not terribly below, but a little bit below. And this is a big part of why we're piloting new curriculum. We need to know where we are in order to make some adjustments, and we see that we have some adjustments to make with our students in literacy. Similar story in the middle school. The results are pretty flat overall and consistently in the 70% range, which is not where we want it to be at that 80% range. So that's iReady, standards reference. Let's talk about the main through year data. So here you're gonna see a higher performance on reading and math. Remember, okay, so 2/3 of the assessment is criterion referenced, 1/3 is norm referenced, and that was a change that was made a couple years ago to make this an assessment that could be used for accountability purposes. So you will see a dip in scores about in 2 years of data, and that may have something to do with a change in the assessment becoming more standards aligned. These charts also look a little different in the language that's in them because the state assessment reports as students at or above grade level, so the language is a little bit different, but you'll be able to see the trends. So here you can see main through year data over time by school. The darkest color, it goes youngest grade on the far left to highest grade. So the red is Wilson School, the dark pink is 4.5, the medium pink is 6.8, and the lightest one on the far right is high school, okay? So in 2021, you'll see that the high school only is not represented there. I think it's important to note that the data was suppressed that year because only 14% of our students participated in the assessment that year. The general story that I can give you here is that starting in 22-23, when the test changed from fully norm referenced to partially criterion referenced, our scores dropped a little bit. That being said, the Wilson School scores bounced back in 2024 quite a bit, which is nice to see. And you see that they're starting to creep back up a little bit. It's early days yet. That was math. This is reading. Again, the high school data was suppressed due to low participation that year. And again, there's a dip, albeit a smaller one, in reading scores that in that 2023 school year. And then the main science assessment. So this assessment changed in that first year, 21-22. If we looked at prior assessment data, you would see much, much higher performance. So we believe that this assessment really changed quite a bit and became quite a bit more rigorous in that year. And so you can see where the middle school has the highest scores there in the 70 to 80-ish range, percentile range. 4 or 5 is a little lower, around 50%, and high school is kind of sitting in the middle in the 60s. How are we doing compared to the state average? So here's a state comparison in math. You can see a decline in achievement over time in our district that mirrors a decline at the state level. But you can also see that our data is definitely stronger than the state, especially in the last 2 years after the assessment changed. So we're concerned about our dip in assessment scores. We're concerned about that for sure, but we definitely still look better than the state average. So here's reading. Reading looks better than math, with a notable dip in 22-23 and a little increase this year, up to 85% proficient as a district. These numbers are hot off the presses. I just pulled this evening for the state. Brand spanking new. And here's the comparison on the science assessment. So you can see that statewide the scores are quite low. That doesn't, we're obviously doing better, but that doesn't mean that we need to be super happy about it, right? We still have work to do. So here's the big question. How are we responding to our data? The short story is we have some work to do. Our scores are mostly flat. There's a gradual decline over time in some areas. There are a number of variables that could be contributing to that I just want to highlight for you. First, there's evidence of residual impacts from interrupted learning during the pandemic. It's locally, statewide, nationally. That is true everywhere. That students are struggling to regain or recoup the skills from that learning, interrupted learning. The science assessment shows a fairly large drop in the last few years, which might be at least partly due to a change in the assessment. We're still learning about those changes, and the information that we're getting in terms of released items is very limited. So we're doing the best we can to understand those changes, and it's taking some time. And then likewise, there was a dip in literacy and math, and that is potentially explained a little bit by some adjustments to that assessment as well. So what are we doing about it, right? First, we've spent some PD time engaging in data analysis, most notably with our math teachers. This was a couple weeks ago, K-12 math teachers across the district, to highlight our data over time, sharing this data with them so that they could see not only their grade span, but the whole district, and make sure that everyone's aware where we are with math achievement. So knowing where we are helps us know where we need to go, right? Our literacy pilots are a direct response to our data over time, indicating that not all of our students are reading on grade level. And so we aim to identify through those pilots curriculum that will meet our needs for teaching both foundational skills and build knowledge through exposure to rich text. That's best practice for literacy instruction. New math curriculum in grades 6 through 8 is in year 2 of implementation and was a direct response to a need for standards-aligned curriculum. We're watching our results closely while we work to implement, and implementation takes time. Teachers need to learn how to teach new curriculum, and that just takes some time. So I would expect those scores to start to go up. Our science teachers are examining the released items that we can get our hands on, and using that to understand the sorts of questions that are being asked of our students. And that helps us reshape what we teach and how we teach it. And then finally, but of equal importance to taking our achievement data very seriously, is actively addressing our attendance rates, which I talked about earlier this fall with you as well, with proactive family communication about the importance of regular attendance. If kids aren't here, we can't teach them, right? So we're messaging that regularly, that it's important for kids to be in school. So the bottom line is that we're reviewing literacy and math curriculum instructional practices in K-12 for a reason. The pilots, the new middle school math curriculum, and our attention to instructional practices that work are all responsive to the needs we see in our achievement data. So this is how we use that data, and hopefully I've clarified a little bit about why we have iReady in addition to Main through year. But with that, what questions do you have for me? I'm sure there are a few.
I mean, I have some, but I won't go first if others do. Did somebody want to go first? Any more questions? It was a great presentation. Thank you. I have just an observation and then a question. So for math, is my observation correct that compared to reading, for iReadies, we're lower than we are for reading, but on the state side, math, we're higher than we are for reading?
Well, we were higher. We're at about 75% in math right now.
Okay.
As a district.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we look at the Main through year reading, 77, 78% to 88%, depending on the grade level. So we're actually in a little bit better shape in reading right now.
Great. Okay. And then you mentioned at the very beginning just about some of the state assessments, how it's very hard to actually use that data because it comes out later. And I was just wondering, did you see anything? I don't know if you've looked at the RFP, if that's something the state's trying to address.
So I don't know. I was not somebody who is participating in the RFP process. I know that it's happening because they sent out an all call to folks around the state to apply to be part of the RFP screening process, right? And Corey Munsey actually had time in his, they were very particular about you have to be available on these dates and you cannot miss any of those days. And I was already booked during those times. So I put it out to the rest of the leadership team and said, if anybody wants to throw their hat in the ring, it can't hurt to have representation there. Corey Munsey did that, but he got an email a few days ago saying, no room at the inn, right? So I think a lot of people had interest, and so I don't know what companies they're looking at or anything of that nature.
Because I'm sure every, school and is interested in how much time gets spent on these tests, and then to feel like the information comes a little too late. So I'm hoping maybe in the RFP that gets addressed so the data are more usable for the school. So I was just curious if you knew. Other questions?
So I can monopolize the time, so I'll try not to. We'll probably have to do a separate conversation because this is I love this stuff. And this is why I have a career in it. So thank you. The presentation was excellent. It's super clear, and also it's for the board and anyone listening. It is. I'm really encouraged that we have our own internal assessment because schools are often at the whim of the state, and we can't control that in the decisions that they make. And for political reasons more than anything, Leanne, the delay is probably always going to be there. The reports that you usually get from states are not even easy to disaggregate. Sometimes they just come in PDFs or old CD-ROMs and stuff like that. So the fact that we have something that we can control is really exciting. iReady is something that I know that most schools use, and I know NWA, MAP, is really good. And the thing I liked about MAP is that you can do percentile growth, right? So not just the attainment percentile, but percentile growth. So do we have a sense and from our assessments right now in terms of the percentage of kids that are hitting their growth targets?
Yeah, so we do get that data through iReady. And that's the parent report that we send home at the end of the year. And so I know that questions have been raised in the past of, why aren't we getting the reports every time students take the assessment? And part of the reason why we wait, and I want to be clear that any parent who wants to request their students' reports, we will give those to them. We're not withholding it per se, but it's really helpful to have the fall to spring growth. And the students have a growth target and they have a stretch growth target. And it's really clear on the graph if they met their growth target, if their growth target gets them on grade level, if they're below grade level, they really need to be meeting their stretch target for a couple of years running to get back on grade level. So we do have that information. I don't have it here this evening, but if you'd like, I can pull that and get that.
Yeah,
to
that would be great. And again, we can do like another thing. And then I just have one more question. It's about two populations. So we served on the equity committee together. So this is a question about this. I know, I don't know what percentage of our students are special ed. Right, my understanding is that it's an increasing amount, but I could be wrong with that. So if we looked at this data by that population, are we hitting the benchmarks that we should? Okay, so could that be a reason why we're seeing a dip? Is a population change, not just the assessment change?
Maybe. So I did look at the disaggregated data. Because I had a feeling you might ask this question, actually, Tim. So again, I could give that to you. A lot of our disaggregated data, when I look at it, is suppressed because we have such small population. And from one year to the next, it might be suppressed or not suppressed, depending on our population. But the two areas where we do see the data pretty consistently showing up is our economically disadvantaged population, which is relatively small, and our special education population, which, Jeff, is it 13%?
It's right around 13 right now.
Yeah. So those populations fluctuate back and forth from one year to the next, and the swing is pretty wide because the population is relatively low, but they're around 50% proficient.
Okay, and the last population, and then I'll let everyone else get into it. But the last population, and I know you, and I know your approach to this, so that's why I feel safe asking it. Are those kids that are the ones that you're like, well, we don't need to worry about that. Those are the kids that are like strong in their grade level, that dark red. What are we doing for them? Because gifted and talented is really only like the 99th percentile, right?
Yeah.
So what are we doing for them to make sure that they also achieve like their growth percentile or beyond that they exceed it?
Yeah, so that is a great question. And I think that is a learning curve for everybody, right? The idea of differentiated instruction for high achievers who don't meet that. Because really, the GT population is 5%. We're limited by state law to 5% of our population. And we have some very, very bright students in our community. And so you can have a student who scores quite high on the standardized assessments, both iReady and Main Through Year, but also on COGAT, but they're below the threshold to be in that 5%, believe it or not. So they're incredibly bright. And in another community, they might be tagged as GT, but in this community, they're not. The way the law works, right? So that being said, I think that comes down to being careful about differentiating instruction. Mark McDonough is our math and science GT teacher, and he has been working closely with Wilson school teachers in particular to differentiate for high achievers in math, to provide them with resources for differentiation. We also invite high achieving students whenever possible to join our math teams for some enrichment and opportunity to think differently about mathematics. Similarly, there is some stretching that happens within the regular ed setting for students who are high achievers in literacy. And I think it's easier to stretch kids in literacy in some ways than math, because math is much more sequential in terms of the content, right? So the ELA teachers are able to do that a little bit more fluidly, but there's also a learning curve there on how to differentiate instruction in the classroom.
Well, thank you, and I feel super confident with you at the helm. You obviously love it, so I appreciate the time. Thank you.
So I guess when I saw the graph or the pyramid shape where it said tier 1, 2, and 3, I assumed, which I shouldn't have, that tier 1, 2, and 3 went both directions. But from what I'm hearing, it goes one direction. In the sense, the people that need help to meet grade level, but not, it doesn't go gifted and talent like
Actually,
it's not.
so multi-tier system support does include gifted and talented services. So it also includes social emotional learning and behavior intervention. So that pyramid is true for a lot of different needs that students might have.
Mm-hmm.
Tonight, I was talking specifically about multi-tiered systems of support diagnostically to support our struggling learners, but it would be true that we would be using that data to identify students who need a stretch, and then talking about what do we need to do for them both in the regular ed setting and do they need additional support elsewhere. And that is also happening at the Wilson School with their MTSS blocks. So it's not just about helping struggling learners, it's also about stretching the high achievers. Sorry I wasn't clear about that.
So how do we walk the line of teaching for the test and preparing our students for the test?
Yeah.
Right? Like, let's get that right down. But still teaching in a whole student.
Yeah, I think there's always this tension between the amount of assessment and the impact is high at 5th and 8th grade in particular, right? Because they have the science assessment, they're the grade that gets invited every 2 years to take the NAEP assessment. Every 2 years, our 8th graders also have the Maya survey. It's a lot. There's a lot of interruption to instructional time to make these assessments work. I think it's a balancing act and a conscious decision. I would feel less okay about it if we were not using our data in meaningful ways to think about our curricular program as a whole, right? What do we need to do if we're not happy with our data, right? Big picture, but also at the very granular individual student level to use that data to inform decisions for each student. Without the data, it's really hard to do that, right? And oftentimes, like in a particular unit of study, you have this instructional window of time and you're really focusing on your instruction for that unit. And you're assessing all along the way, so you can pretty confidently say, these students are going to ace the test at the end of the unit. But can they still ace that material 3 months later when you reintroduce it in a different context? Don't we want that for our kids, right? So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think it's really a choice and a balancing act and making conscious decisions about we're going to use this information to inform our instruction.
So I'll ask about a specific example, but to ask a broader question, I guess. I think I remember seeing in the 6-8 data that literacy was maybe not where we want it to be, reading and writing scores, and knowing that we currently have the pilots at MIW and for the 4-5 grade level, are we looking toward something different for 6-8, or just more broadly, are there gaps, knowing that we can't address everything all at once, but gaps that are kind of on the horizon to be addressed?
Yeah, so I think yes and, right? Always looking at what are the curriculum implications, what are the instructional implications. But I think the thing that I would highlight here is that I think that these students were students who also received units of study, and so their foundational skills instruction may have been lacking. And what the literature says is that students, if you look at a population of students, about 70% of students who don't have foundational skills will figure out how to read. And then you have 30% who can't decode and don't figure out the code, and they really continue to struggle all the way through. And look at where our numbers are, right? So to me, you know, I'm making a bit of a leap in conclusion there, right? I don't know for sure that that's what's going on, but I suspect that we will see students coming up because they're getting foundational skills instruction in elementary school now.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that makes sense. Thank you.
Kim?
Again, thank you. My question has to do with kind of going off of the presentation of the annual report that we got 2 weeks ago. So looking at the annual report that's on our data dashboard, there's a big gap that says state assessment data from 2020 to 2022 unavailable due to COVID, but it is available here, right? So am I looking at two different reports compared to what's on the data dashboard?
I don't have the data dashboard in front of me.
Yeah, okay,
Pam,
so I'm just kind of curious because I think
it was not, so if I'm going back in time.
no, it's okay. Yeah,
But
I'm curious.
I
yeah.
think it did not count at that point because of COVID. Is that right, Jeff? It didn't count, but we did get scores.
The state threw out the scores at least 1 year, I remember.
Yeah, and I think that might have been 2021.
And that may be why there's a gap there.
Yeah, we'll have to.
Yeah. So,
but I'm not sure because I have to see it in front of me to know. But yeah, there was at least 1 year where they were sort of saying everybody's off the hook for accountability.
Sure. I actually think there was 2 years.
Okay.
When the state did that.
Well, according to this, it's 5 or 4. But the reason I'm asking is because when I look at that, my question is, how are we doing compared to before COVID? That is a question we get all the time, right? Like, it's great to see that things are overall improving since the terrible, horrible year, but we do want to know how things are looking since before that, you know, all of that, so we can compare how kids are doing. And then of course, if somebody's going to look at how we're doing, just to look at our district online, and then they see the gaps, I feel like, you know, we can hopefully fill that in a little bit, because I do want to know in general just kind of what we're looking at. My other question, so I don't expect
I actually
answer
can
on
speak.
this. Okay.
I can speak to that.
Okay.
Though.
Okay. Great.
So because I'm a data nerd, so I've looked at this for years, right? And so what I know is that just like every other school in the country, there was definitely a dip through COVID, and things are slowly starting to increase, right? So. And in fact, nationally, this past year, it went like this from COVID. It started to go up, and then it dipped again, right? So our data actually looks a little bit better than when you look around the state and the country, for sure. And it may be that, so the assessment did change right around the time that COVID was happening, right? So that may be why you don't have some of that data in the dashboard. It's not at all comparable.
Yeah, when you look at the dashboard, I'm on it right now. The state did remove the data from the years 2020 to 2022. So that's reflected in these graphs. That's why there's no information. Yeah. So we have information up through 2019. And then it starts up again in 2023. And remember, the data, the assessment is fall, spring. So that we might have not had that information at one season or another. But those 2 years, the state threw it out. Yeah. That's why it's not there.
Yeah. And I mean, the numbers are much higher in 23, 24 than they were in 2019. So it's all, So my other question, kind of comparing state assessment with iReady for the annual report, and I asked this question 2 weeks ago. I think when it was looking at the annual report, but it might have been the iReady, is it looked like the proficiency level went down when you went from Mabel Wilson up through the high school. But when you look at it from the MDOT, it looks like it's going up from Mabel Wilson through the high school. And I'm just kind of curious if there's any reason for that, why it would be that one assessment shows that the proficiency level goes up as they proceed, and one shows that they go down.
Well, I think it's potentially dangerous territory to compare those assessments to each other because they're quite different from each other.
Sure.
And so I think knowing a little bit about how those assessments are referenced can be helpful in thinking about it.
Okay.
But again, I'm struggling because it's not right in front of me, Kim.
No,
but
that's fine. Yeah.
That's where I would probably lean, is that they're really two different assessments.
Yeah.
And remember that any given assessment is for the student a moment in time.
Yeah.
Right? So, I'm thinking back to a couple of years ago. I think some students really were not taking some of the spring assessment. They just got fatigued and they were like, I'm just not going to give it the old college try anymore. I'm done. Right? And so was it their best work on that day, on that Tuesday in May or whatever? Maybe not, right? So I think there are a lot of things and variables that go into that achievement. And so I do think looking over time at student achievement is really helpful for that. But I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
No, that's okay. If you
Kim,
think of
come
it.
with me, Kim. We'll have a date. We'll all go with Nari. It'll be an equity committee reunion.
Nerd out. I love it.
And when you look at, I think what Kim's referencing is when you're on the data dashboard, there are two charts. And you're talking about iReady, Kim?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. There's the reading and there's the math. And obviously this data is over a period of time from 2017 or 18, depending on the content area, up through the current. And during that time, obviously, a lot of things have happened. We've changed programs. We've had a literacy pilot that became a strategic priority. We had a 2-year pandemic, basically, that disrupted learning in there. So you're going to see these scores all over the place. But you're right. Generally speaking, when you look at iReady, literacy and math, you're seeing that at the lower grades, we tend to be in the 80s percentile. And then at the older grades, it kind of dips. I think you're seeing, for example, in 6-8, you're seeing an increase from 2022 to 24, and that's because of the implementation of the new math program that we had. And I think you're going to see a correlation between those things. But there's a lot to unpack, and I think because there's been a lot of things going on. And I hate to blame the pandemic, but I will do it at any moment I can. And I definitely think it has something to do with it.
Yeah, and since you just mentioned math, I did have a question. I know there was actually like a student-led effort, at least last year, just around questions and concerns about the middle school math program. And if the new program was meant to address some of that, or how is that being dealt with?
So it is meant to address some of that. And the curriculum itself has differentiation resources built into it, so that, and the model is intended to be something that is not whole class delivery, but you deliver differentiated instruction to students based on where they are with a pre-assessment, right? And the teachers are learning how to do that. I will not stand here and say that they're doing it with fidelity yet. It's a wholesale change in instructional practice, and that takes time.
Okay.
So, but that's what I mean about it takes several years to implement a new curriculum. So there are resources and intention around moving in that direction. I think the other thing I'll let you know is that I and Monty Selby and Allison Hinckley, the math specialist at the middle school, will be meeting with student government in January. I tried to meet with them last spring, and we couldn't work out the dates to have it work out. Every time they were available, I had a meeting, and every time I was available, they weren't anyway, it didn't work out. So we're meeting in January to talk about student concerns related to being able to access higher level math in high school.
Yep, great.
So that is on the radar.
Great, thank you. Megan?
I have a quick question about science.
Okay.
I've heard you say that there's a new literacy program and that there was a pivot based on the data for math. Is there any exploration into looking at different science curriculums, whether it's just in our district or sort of statewide, because all of those numbers were on the lower side?
Yeah, so not yet, because I would rather do something well. And we have our hands full with literacy and math right now. So science and social studies will be next in line to take a hard look at things, which is not to say that our science teachers aren't getting together and looking at that data really seriously and using that to inform what they focus on in their curriculum. It's difficult to do that when the test is administered in May to 5th and 8th graders who become 6th and 9th graders by the time you get the data back, and the number of released items or items that were on a prior assessment that you can analyze and look at and think about what are our students being asked to do and what are the instructional implications for that are far and few between. So it's really challenging. The science assessment in particular is really challenging to use in a meaningful way to inform where we go, but the teachers are trying. They're using their PD time for that.
I would also just jump in and say that the state flipped to the NGSS standards, which are more national science standards, and Maine adopted those 3 years ago?
A few years ago, yeah.
3 or 4 years ago. And those are very rigorous standards for science. And so I'm not surprised that the statewide assessment for science is gone down. Yep.
Can I ask one last question? Well, maybe someone else has a question. What is the reason the state gives for taking so long? Asking for a friend.
Oh, I have.
Know anybody going to this?
I'm going to keep a lot in my thought bubble.
Asking things now.
So the Maine through year assessment data was quite late coming to us. It was promised to us in July. They said, you will have it in July. July came and went. They said, you'll have it in August. And then it came to us in early September. And the reason that was provided was that the initial scoring that was done showed our students statewide dropping precipitously. And so they needed to look at their calibration of the scoring because it was wildly off base, right? And so they really had to tidy that up before they could distribute the student scores back to the schools and out to families. So I think it was a bit of a debacle for that one, and just quite late coming to us. But in any given year, it has to do with them scoring it and then calibrating the scores, and it just takes them a really long time.
I would say, Christina, you probably know this too, that the state assessment has been a revolving door for many years, but there was a time, I remember back in the 90s and 2000s when we had the MEA and was a very stable assessment. Then we had the NECAP, which was around for five or 6 years, and that was stable. And I think we saw a better return timeline, but when we keep flipping these assessments, the state starts losing control. And the MEA was more of a state assessment. It was done internally. We had a company, obviously, that did it, but we had a lot more control over that assessment. I think we had the MEA for like 15 years at least.
It was a long time.
It was a long time.
Yeah.
And that became, the state really was on a roll with that. They knew how to flip those scores. I've really seen in the last 10 years a real change in the state assessment. And in terms of accuracy standards, superintendents have made this case to the commissioner. Can we?
It's probably why there's an RFP out.
Yes. I
Well,
don't
we
even
pivoted
know.
to Common Core, and then they are pivoting away from that. So it's whatever's kind of like hot right now that they try to align to. And then by the time we get to that point, now it's no longer hot, and there's another trend. And then the other part from the delay is also tends to be they don't want to release the scores and have a narrative get lost without it because they use it for accountability. And so if the longer they hold on to it, and closer they keep to the release of the report card, the easier it is for them to kind of maintain control of it. And there's a lot of data cleaning to be done before that point with very limited resources at the state level. It's not a very well-paying position, those people that handle it. So
That's a really good point, because right now we're in a month-long period. Every time we get our state assessment, every district's given about a month to look over our data before it's actually published on the ESSA report card on the state. So we get to make sure that our data looks accurate before the state actually publishes it. So Marie has the fun job of making sure our data looks good. I think I just sent that to you today.
I just got it today.
Just to make sure that it looks good, or it looks accurate.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Appreciate
everyone.
it. And for all the answers to all of our questions. All right. So next up, we have our fun display. And I'd like to invite Jesse to present on the recommendation from the Artificial Turf Committee.
All right, do you want to run through the slides?
Sure.
Okay, I'll go quickly. Most of you, I think, saw these because I presented very similar slides to the building committee last night, but for those of you who weren't at the building committee and those of you watching at home, we'll catch you up on what the turf committee's been doing and the recommendations we gave to the building committee last night and where they fell out last night. So the subcommittee, the turf subcommittee members included 2 school board members, 2 community members, 1 really coach, 2 student athletes, 3 boosters, 3 administrators, and the project architects. And I'll note that they had a wide range of experience. We did not pack the committee with only sport boosters. We had a number of folks who have only children in Mabel I. Wilson, so they don't really have any skin or athletes in the game. We had an environmental lawyer who has experience with PFAS to make sure that we were being responsive to that promise we made. We had a number of collegiate administrators, athletic administrators and coaches who deal with turf all the time. Also, a member of our committee owns an indoor turf facility, so we also had people who know about various brands of turf and could bring that expertise. So a wide range of folks, so that we had a lot of lively discussion and made sure that we were covering all our bases. So the work we conducted, we had 6 meetings ranging for 2 to 3 hours. We had presentations from 6 turf-related companies, 5 companies that actually make turf, and they, took the time and effort to fly or drive here and present to us and give us samples. And that's Geosurfaces, Sprint Turf, AstroTurf, Field Turf, and Shaw. Those are 5 of some of the, the major turf manufacturers and installers in the country, and also Brock, who makes a shock pad that goes underneath turf, and they also sell an organic infill that you can use on turf. We also had a presentation from Musco Lighting about upgrading our current light situation from what I believe are halogen lights to LED light fixtures that can use the existing poles. So going into this process, we had some criteria set for us by the prior board and promises that were made during the One Campus Project campaign, and those promises were that the turf will be PFAS-free, recyclable, and no chrome rubber infill. And we took those very seriously, and at the outset of our meetings, I said these are non-negotiable criteria that we need to meet, and if we can't meet them, we'll have to make a recommendation that the board needs to either rescind those promises or decide what to do. And so I'm sure if you Google PFAS, you will note that there are many turf projects where people were promised something and they didn't get what they were promised. So, hence having an environmental lawyer, there are many different tests you can do for PFAS. So there's a couple EPA tests. EPA 537 tests for about 50-ish PFAS chemicals, the really nasty ones that we know are really bad and you don't want. But it just looks for those. EPA 3711 looks for more, but still not all of them, because there are thousands, and some of them we don't know if they're good or they're bad. And then there are many other tests, but you can do a total organic fluorine test, or a TOF, and that test just looks for any organic fluorinated compound, and PFAS are fluorinated compounds. So also fluoride is a fluorinated compound, so got to make sure there's no fluoride in there. But if you do that test, it won't tell you which PFAS is in there, but it will tell you if a PFAS is in there. So it is a very broad but not specific test. But that test is available, and it is not expensive to run. And so we as a committee decided that that is probably the test we should require, and see what we get. And it turns out there are vendors that have products that can meet that test. And it's very difficult to meet that test because you produce a product, and if you bring that product home and then send it to get tested, it's going to have PFAS on it because there is PFAS in this room. There's PFAS on your jacket if it's made of polyester. There's PFAS probably in your soap or your hand lotion or whatever else, right? Like, not a lot, but enough that it'll show up on that test. So this testing is really difficult, and the vendors told us this, that like they had to develop standards, and I believe ASTM is working on standards for how you test on this. So you can test it, but once it's out in the world, it's going to get some PFAS on it, but it'll come free of PFAS if they, and they'll test it right after it's manufactured. So we feel good about that one. Second one, so all vendors state that both turf and infill is recyclable, and that is true. But also the truth is it costs more money. So at the end of the turf's life, it is cheaper to just put it in a landfill, and if you want to recycle it, it comes at a cost, and you have to pay that cost. So one example of a way you can recycle the turf grass blades is that shock pad that is underneath that first turf there. That pad is made from recycled carpet and recycled turf fibers. So that's the Shaw will recycle your turf for an extra cost, and they will mix it with some of their carpets, which this may be a Shaw carpet. They're the largest carpet manufacturer in the country, and they will make shock pads that they can then sell to people who install turf fields. They can also make like Trex decking. They can just recycle it into pellets that they can use in other plastic things. And again, this comes at a cost because plastic is cheap, and it's cheaper to make new plastic than recycle it. But if you're willing to pay that cost, it can be recycled. But we won't have to deal with that until we're done with our turf field. So it's a promise we've made, but you're going to have to hold us accountable when we replace this turf field to make sure we don't just landfill it. And then finally, we did not consider recycled tire crumb rubber, or SBR. That was just never considered as an infill option. So here's where the field's going to be. It's going to be about 104,000 square feet. You'll notice there's a logo in the middle. We decided we probably will not pay for the inlaid logo, but we might paint one. Yeah, it's going to be a very big field, so there will be lots of extra space on the end zones and the sidelines so that players can warm up and practice. We will get to have a really nice sized soccer field. I learned in this process soccer fields can be many different sizes. There's not like a standard soccer field size, so we can have like a FIFA, like maximally sized amazing soccer field and get our soccer players to be really fit and outrun everyone else when they got to play on our big field and keep winning state championships. So this field's going to include a couple of things. So first, we're going to regrade the field. Basically, they're going to rip out 8 inches of topsoil. They will put drainage in, some rock, and then they will put in, fine stone that they will pack. And it will go from a kind of wonky field that it is now to a perfectly crowned field. And a crown is just the rise over the course of the field. So it'll rise about 6 inches. So if you look down, it's not perfectly flat. It'll rise sort of like 6 inches from the middle to the sides. But again, it's a big field, so it's like barely perceptible. But you want like a little bit of a crown in a perfect field. And if we have the ability to engineer a perfect field, why wouldn't we? And then again, I said, upgraded LED fixtures on the poles. And then finally, on top of this perfect field that we will create is a resilient artificial turf playing surface. And that resilient surface is meant so that our students can play, starting from the first game and practice of the year all the way to the last one. The moment it stops raining, you can play on that field. You can blow the snow off and play on that field. There will be no missed games, practices. There will be no forfeited matches. So the LED lighting upgrade, this is massive. So we can use the existing poles. You're basically swapping out the fixtures and adding the little box in the middle. And what this is going to provide is uses way less electricity. I'm sure you all have LED bulbs at home, and you know your electricity bill goes down. So about 80% reduction in electricity cost, much better visibility on the field. So 50-foot candles, which foot candles is how they measure the amount of light. So it will be sort of perfect lighting all the way across the field, as opposed to getting sort of like hot spots like you get with current halogen lighting. Huge for the community is much, much less light pollution, and that's both glare and light spill. So the current light, it's a bit like a lighthouse. If you look at the lights from like blocks and blocks away, you notice that the lights are on in the stadium, right? You can see that light from far away. These current LED lights have hoods, so the light is directed down. So if you look at those lights from far away, you won't necessarily know that they're on, or you'll minimally be able to notice them versus being blinded by them. And there's also much less light spill, so the LED light has a very sharp cutoff, which is actually problematic because we now need to light our walkways, because instead of just a bunch of light spilling everywhere, the lights on the field and then 10 feet off the field, it's pretty dark, which is a good thing, but also a bad thing because we got to install some lights so that people can get to the field without tripping. Pretty amazing. And then finally, we learned that you can get this spec, this dark skies spec. So if you care about light pollution and birds and bats and bugs and everything else, you can pay this organization, Dark Skies, and they will come out, and for about, I think it's $1,000, they will spec the lights, the light setup, and tell you how you would have to engineer it to meet their specification. And Musco told us that it's entirely possible that the lights that they're going to have would just meet that spec anyways. It's also possible that they would have to add like maybe one extra light per pole and use them at a lower wattage to meet that spec. He said sometimes it comes with like a 10% additional cost, and then you can get Dark Skies to come out afterwards and make sure that if you spent that extra cost, that it meets that specification. I think this would be a great thing to do if we can raise the money or find somebody who wants to help us do it, because this benefits the entire community, because it's less light pollution. But again, there's going to be way less light pollution no matter what. But that's sort of if you want to meet the like best standard, we could do that. So let's talk infill options. So infill is what you put on the field in between the blades of grass, and there are many, many options, and they are listed here, and I will go through them relatively quickly. So SBR, styrene, butadiene rubber, that is what your tires are made of, and this is what this infill is made of. It's recycled tires. They grind them up. And they grind them up a bunch of different ways. Sometimes they freeze them and smash them. They do a bunch of different things, but it's just recycled tires. It's the cheapest. It's widely used. They've used it for a long time. It is not under consideration because there can be nasty things in it. They will claim they have found a way to get the nasty things out, but we didn't even require it. Think about it. So next up is EPDM, which is a different type of rubber, and so this can be either virgin or recycled material. It's similar to tire rubber in its characteristics. It's bouncy, so it's also often used on playground surfaces or tracks when you sort of seems like it's a melted plastic surface or melted rubber surface, or a running track. It's bouncy. It's because it's made of this. You don't need a shock pad underneath because it's already bouncy. So that is also a widely used infill material for people who don't want the tires. There's TPE, which is little plastic balls. You can get them half made out of soy and corn if you want it to be less petrochemically, but still half petrochemically. It's very expensive, so tires are the cheapest. EPDM's a little more expensive. This is about 5 times as expensive as the tires. Very resilient, though. So, some people like it and will pay a premium for it. Shoe grind is ground up shoes. They have this in Freeport, Nike grind, which I don't know that they make anymore. They just take old shoes and they grind them up and use it as infill. There's many, many organics, and we talked to many people about them and looked at many different varieties. They make it out of corn cobs, a specific piece of the corn cob. They make it out of olive pits. They make it out of walnut shells. They make it out of cork or coconut where they mix it together. They also make it out of wood pellets or wood particles from loblolly pines that they're specially rounded. There's many others. We looked at many, many, many of them. I talked to many schools that have installed them. So because they are not bouncy, they don't provide any safety or sort of concussion protection. So you have to have a shock pad underneath, and I will talk about shock pads next. So it's just basically just to hold up the fibers of the turf. There's many options available, varying pros and cons to them. A couple examples of these. In Portsmouth, New Hampshire, they have the walnut shells, which I thought was very cool. And then Brock fill, which is the little wood particles. They have that in Scarborough. I talked to many people who've installed these various systems. They're great for some sports. They're horrible for football. Basically, everyone doesn't like playing football on them because you bleed when you get tackled on them, for the most part, at least for the walnuts and the wood particles. And a huge downside is that in cold weather they freeze because they're organic and they absorb water. So in the summer it's great because they provide some evaporative cooling. So if you live in the south, your field is cooler than if you had rubber. But if you live in the north, they get wet and freeze, and then you have a crunchy field. And if the point is to have a resilient field you can play on in the very early spring and very late fall, maybe you don't want a crunchy field. That's the downside. And then finally, the latest and greatest in turf technology is a no-fill system, where instead of having rubber or instead of having TPE or organics, you just don't have anything, and you just have lots of wiggly grass blades to hold up the other blades, which is what we have an example of here. And similarly, because there's no rubber bouncy stuff, you need something to protect the players and provide the safety characteristics and playing characteristics. You need to have a shock pad underneath, just like with organics. Yeah. So let's talk blade types. So this is a field that we're going to play 4 different sports on. Now, if you only played field hockey, you would want a split film type of turf. It plays very fast. If you were playing just football, you would want a monofilament type of turf, which this first example is. It's more just like tall grass, and it's a little softer, plays very slow. If you're playing 4 different sports, including field hockey and football, you go with a hybrid, which has both and is not the best for anything, but is okay at everything, and that's what we're recommending. So in our research as a committee, we learned that the quality of the turf yarns is really important if you care about it holding up over time, and also if you care about it not breaking down and contributing more environmental pollution to the environment. And the way you can test this is with this wacky machine that rolls back and forth with these studs, and it moves side to side too. So this just goes back and forth to test the durability. It's called a Lisport test. So 20,000 cycles is 8 years, 30,000 cycles is equivalent to 12 years, and there's a very large variation in quality between various products. So these are 2 products that went through 30,000 cycles of testing. You'll notice on the left, and I removed the names of the companies that used to be at the bottom. On the left, after 30,000 cycles, which is 12 years of simulated use, blades look pretty good. And on the right, you'll notice after 30,000 cycles, those blades are shredded and have hair splitting and fracturing and complete splitting. And lots of little pieces of those are in the ocean now being eaten by fish, which is not great. So we thought it was really important. We want to go with a premium high-quality product because it'll last longer, but also it won't do horrible things to the environment, and so we can feel good about it. So let's talk shock pads. So you can use a shock pad even if you have rubber, you just use less rubber. You can use you have to use a shock pad with organic infills, and you would have to use a shock pad with the no infill system. So that provides the base layer of safety and the bouncy characteristics you want. So it's very important to some of these newer turf type systems. And so there's 3, there's many, but there's 3 we identified that can pass total organic fluorine testing, so they don't have PFAS, so we could actually use them. And so this is the Brock pad. It has virgin polypropylene in it, which is why it's all white. It has a 25-year warranty, so you can probably use it for 2 cycles of turf, probably more. So, when the turf is worn out after 12 or 15, however many years, you take the turf up, make sure the shock pad's fine, put more turf on it, go again. This particular company, Brock, all of their products are cradle-to-cradle certified. That's an organization that tests where your materials come from, how they're processed, how you treat your workers, yada, yada. they like to brag about how good they are, and so they have this certification, recyclable, blah, 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 blah. Brock also makes a less good pad that has a 16-year warranty. It's got 30% recycled content. That's the black bits in it, and the white bits are new bits. But also a great, has the same great playing characteristics and everything, but they warranty it for less time. It's, cheaper, but less good. And the third one, this GeoFlow pad, it's very similar to the Brock pad. It's virgin polypropylene. It's just, has a 25-year warranty, passes total organic fluorine testing. All three of these pads have great playing characteristics. Any of them would be good. So talking about lines, so there's many things you can do with lines and turf fields. You can put all the lines in permanently, and there's different ways to do it. So with 4 Sports, if we installed all the lines, there would be 4 different colors on that field at all times, which makes it a little busy and confusing. Some players don't mind it. 5. Oh, because lacrosse, girls and men's and women's lacrosse. So 5 sets of lines. 4 Sports, 5 sets of lines. There's a lot of different colors. It's like, are we blue? Are we red? Are we white? Are we yellow? Players say they get used to it. It's mostly fans are like, how are they in or are they out? Which is problematic for fans watching sports. But it does allow players to use that field at any time because the lines are always there. You can go the opposite direction and have a green field and just paint it like you would with grass. And that's a more professional look. It's what that's what they do at Gillette Stadium. It's more work for the grounds crew because like they do now, they have to paint the lines and then take the lines off and then paint different lines seasonally. That work can be done manually. You can buy a robot to do it like Falmouth has. And you can also do a hybrid. You can have some lines permanent and paint the other lines. So Falmouth has football and soccer. They paint lacrosse. They use a little robot that costs $13,000 a year to do. You can pay extra and have that robot paint your logo and do a bunch of other weird stuff if you want. Or you can just paint it by hand. So in the end, so we had all these meetings. We had many, many, many discussions about all of these different things. We looked at hundreds, maybe thousands of documents, sent many, 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 many emails. I talked to people who use all of these products. We asked for testing, and if they have total organic fluorine testing, they will send it to you because they know their product is clean. And if they don't, they will say, we don't have that testing, or then they won't give it to you. So we recommended that you don't paint any lines. We have a clean field. We paint the things we want when we want. It's what we do now. We know we can do it. We have a great grounds crew, so we weren't worried about that. So our recommendations, we had 2. The turf committee was not a monolith, so we didn't all agree on one thing, but we agreed that there are 2 great options. The first option is a traditional style of turf. It's a synthetic infill using the EPDM I mentioned. We recommend if we went this way, go with a high quality hybrid turf product. So 50 ounces plus face weight, which just means it's heavy duty. So it's better, it breaks less, it lasts longer. Infill of EPDM granular rubber and sand. Don't need a shock pad because the bouncy EPDM provides, all of the performance characteristics you need. It's very similar to fields in Falmouth and Cape Elizabeth, except they use the tire SBR rubber. And that's the type of field that most students like because they play on it and it's better than other fields. So it's what players know. So the pros, many vendor options. Players know what the surface feels like. There's a documented performance history because these types of fields have been around for a long time. You can play on it year round. Cons or routine maintenance. You gotta make sure you're raking those rubber pellets because if you don't, they're providing the safety characteristics. And if you have a low spot and slap your head on the ground, you're going to get a concussion. So again, we have a great grounds crew, so we were not worried about that. They will take care of the maintenance. And the other con is that it's 40,000 pounds of little microplastics, and that just comes with, that's what it is. That's what's providing the infill and the bounciness in the system. The second recommendation we had was a no infill system. So there's examples of it here. Pivot turf by Geosurfaces. You need a shock pad underneath. Like I said, there are at least three shock pad options that we could go with that are all great. So the pros, it has a longer warranty. So it's warranted for 12 years, whereas every other turf product out there warranties their product for 8 to 10. There's no concern with the microplastic infill that's going to get in your shoes and your bag, and some of it's going to get into the environment. And it's also usable year-round. That was very important for us. We didn't recommend an organic infill because we didn't want a crunchy frozen field. We want to be able to use it whenever we want. The cons are that this is a brand new product in the U.S., so they had one install in 2023 and then rolled the rest of them out in 2024. So we would be the first install in New England in the Northeast. There's no firsthand experience. Nope, none of our players have played on this type of field because they just started installing them in the U.S., and there's only one vendor that makes this right now. They've been installing these types of fields in Europe because this company is a company based in the Netherlands. So Europe's had these type of fields for several years, but mostly for football. Another unknown is no one's played field hockey on it because they're all installed in the South, but we've talked to people who installed them. They like them for soccer, they like them for football, they like them for lacrosse, but like would be the first for field hockey. So, you know, the latest and greatest, but it's a step into the unknown potentially. So we presented this to the building committee, and there was 2+ hours of discussion, many questions. We tried to answer them all. There was vigorous debate because, again, we're not a monolith and different people have different opinions, which is great. We had an honest conversation. And in the end, a lot of discussion. The building committee members voted unanimously to recommend the no infill pivot turf product to the board. We decided that Rangers should lead the way and potentially be the first school in the Northeast to install this type of field. We think it provides the performance characteristics we're looking for. It's feel good from a environmental sustainability point of view, and because it has a shock pad underneath, when it wears out eventually, we can just pull it off, put whatever the latest and greatest technology is. All the vendors told us that turf is going to change a lot in the next 10 years. They've banned synthetic infills in Europe starting in 2030. So every manufacturer is coming up with brand new products to meet the needs of people who don't want crunchy organic fields. So whatever the next field we install is going to be much better and have cooler technology and be even better to play on. But we think this one is good enough that we should go first and join the latest and greatest in turf technology. So I'll end it there. If there are questions, I can probably answer them, or I can send you the link to our Google Drive and you can look at our documents.
Thank you, Jesse. I am so proud of the work that the turf committee has put into this, and under your leadership, it's just been incredible in ensuring that we're holding ourselves to the promises that the previous board made. You weren't on, you weren't even there, and just how honest and transparent you and the committee have tried to be through this whole process with the promises and ensuring that what is being put forward, we're going to be able to stand by those. And so I think, you know, this presentation and the work that you've done and the committee has done has been extraordinary. And yeah, if you want to know about what Arkansas says about their turf field, Jesse can tell you because he's talked to them. So, I know a lot of the members of the board. We had Christina was on the turf committee with Jesse, so she was part of a lot of these conversations. And then last night, it was a really wonderful conversation with the building committee, who Tim chairs, and Megan and Sean were part of that. So there's actually very few board members left. I know Sarah also attended last night, and I've been able to be a part of a number of these meetings. So it was great to be able to present this to the board and to the community. And yeah, what questions do people have for Jesse?
I have a question. So I will say, in being fully transparent, our athletic director is here, and he was the most skeptical of this new product because, and I fully understand, students haven't played on it yet. And so I talked to him this morning and I said, think about it all day and I'll ask you your opinion tonight, because if we're being transparent and he has misgivings, I think we should hear about them, and we should be transparent with the board that, like, we're going with a new product, we're leading the way, but also, you know, we convinced him last night, but maybe he's rethought now that he doesn't have the pressure, but I'm putting pressure on him. So Dave, if you have thoughts, like, I would love to hear them, because again, your students are going to be, your championship students are going to be playing on this field, and I wanted to give you a chance to weigh in.
Yes. Thank you.
First of all, again, thank you for all your work. You've already said it, the Turf Committee did a great job. No stone, no filament left unturned or unreviewed. It was, I learned a lot. I knew enough to be dangerous to begin with, but maybe I know a little bit more now. Honestly, I stand here like relieved. I think we nailed it. So again, maybe had a little buyer's remorse after the meeting last night. So first thing in the morning, I called the vendor of the pivot product and had a nice conversation with him. I also looked through their list of folks that maybe they didn't recommend to us on their list, but actually had the product. I know that in Illinois, they love it. So I talked to the guy who was he's a football coach and the athletic director at the school in Illinois. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head right now. And
Muscatique.
There's two.
Yeah.
No,
Got
that
a
wasn't
message
it.
from me too. Sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
okay.
There's two. There's two in Illinois.
Nice job. So, long story short, he okay, that's a little different animal than what we are. So they flew the team down to Alabama to go run some routes, have some practices, and they wanted to make sure, and did their agility drills on it, this, that, and the other thing, to make sure this was going to be a product that they really wanted. So they did that. So they did all their homework, and they too were the forerunners in their area to have this type of field. And they're like, oh, so he goes, first day they get out there, he walks on it, and he's like, oh my Lord, what have I done? Mm-hmm. It was weird. But then they continued to play on it, and it got better and better. And they love it. They said he played in almost monsoon conditions. Didn't stop the game, probably should have. The field was drained perfectly, and it was like you were playing on a dry field throughout. So I felt a lot better after that. We were prompted last night by, forget what board member or committee member was in there, about our motto that we lead the way. So, let's lead the way in being innovators and being the first one in the Northeast to have this product. And I talked to some of our students today too, who are on our committee. Again, that's my focus. We want to make sure that the voice of our students are heard. They were very clear in what they wanted initially from the surveys that we did of them, but they were also very open to, I think there was an evolution of thought about this product, even among the kids, particularly field hockey, who doesn't play on this at all. If you go to Europe or you go to Bowdoin, it is a field hockey field. That's why there's so little information for us about that type of play on that type of field, because they just don't use it. But I feel really good that, Jesse already had mentioned that no matter what field we get, it's going to be great, first of all, but there's not a field that is perfect for every single sport. That doesn't exist. When any one of those turf products you get is not perfect for every sport, but what we will get is going to be outstanding, really much better than, and playable. We want to be able to play. That was a bottom line. I asked him, can we play on this every single day? And the answer was yes. We can do that without fail, and that's what we want. There's a strong correlation when I do my progress report. I always tell you that 85% of our honor roll is comprised of kids who are student athletes. There is a very strong correlation between being active and exercising and your brain's ability to learn. So the more kids that we're going to be out and active, whether it's recess at the middle school, that it can be out there even when it's kind of after it rains, to our varsity athletes winning state championships. If those kids are more active, they're going to do better in the classroom, and that's what we're all about, because we're education-based athletics. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to come up and speak to you. I am thrilled that we will be innovators, and let's get some shovels in the ground and get our kids out playing. So, any questions? That was my soapbox.
Did it freeze, and did you talk about snow or cold weather in Illinois?
I didn't actually, but again, we can.
I got that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
So I didn't get a hold of the person, the athletic director, but my family's originally from that area. So it's in southern Illinois. There's two schools, the M1 and then Centralia.
Yes, that's who I called.
So it's southern Illinois. So it's not as cold like Chicago. It would be like comparable to here. They do not get as much, so I talked to my family members in that rough area. They don't get as much snow as we do, usually, but they do get the freezing temperatures and the freezing rain and the ice. And they're like, so
I had that report about the weather at any rate, and the field seemed fine, according to the person that knew the person that's been on it. So, such as it is.
And there's been lots of installs in Europe and what we feel similar
Yeah,
climates.
Norway, and
Yeah.
there are pictures of them clearing the snow and then playing soccer on it. So
Okay, great. Other questions? Yes, Annika.
So I guess one of my questions I would frame around next steps. So I think, as I understand, and I was not able to attend last night's meeting, so there may have been some information shared there as well, but that we will be voting on this at our next meeting. But I guess I'm also trying to frame for myself what this is going to be, whether that will be the full package of what we'll be looking at in terms of shock pad, as well as the no infill turf product, as well as the lighting, or if it's just different components of that. And then also, it sounds like maybe there was some information shared about potential costs, which I would be curious about. And the last thing, which is not really a question, but I will just put a plug in there, that maybe we want to budget for the recycling over time, rather than having that be something that is just a massive expense when the time comes.
yeah, so the recycling isn't that expensive. It's like, like $30,000 more than throwing it away. So I mean, it's a cost, but it's not like a crazy cost. We do have rough cost information, and we are on budget. But again, it's rough cost information. But the architects have figured out for the drainage and the work and the dust and this and the cost of the turf and the lights and everything. We didn't budget in some would be nice to have items. So there's some items for those of you who want to raise money for us. If you want to raise money for there's a party package for the upgraded LED lights. So when you get a touchdown, it's like boom, 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 with the music. It's I don't know, it's $40,000 or $50,000. So that's not in the budget. Public, but if somebody is rich and wants to buy it for us, we would love it. So yeah, we're where we need to be. None of this is out of reach. I think for next steps, we need to approve moving forward, and then we need to figure out how we want to acquire it. So I think the lights and the fencing and some other items are going to be bid separately. And then there's a question about, do you bid everything together? So the company that does this, Geosurfaces, which is owned by 10Kate, which is one of the largest turf manufacturers in the world, they can do everything. So they can come in, take out the soil, do the stuff, blah, blah, blah. They can do everything. Or we can bid the site work separately, and then they can just come in at the end, make sure that the field looks good, put the shock pad and turf on. So we can do it either as one big package or two packages. And we also need to figure out how we want to contract that. And we're still working on what the best mechanism is for that.
And to your question, we don't have the exact language of what we're having for the item for action in 2 weeks, but we did want to make sure this is an open and transparent process, that tonight we're giving the presentation. It's going to be online. If there's more questions, to give that 2-week time to have a vote on. I think one of the main things was just so the whole board has the opportunity to vote on the product that we're moving forward with. And so that's what we're really focused on. And I think there's been assurances along the way that everything we're talking about is within the budget and scope. So how it gets paid for, I don't know if that will necessarily be part of it, but that it was within the scope of the project. So, but we're still working some of those details out. Kim, did you have a question?
Yeah. So, David, the team that was suddenly playing on this field, did the coach, was it your understanding that by the end of that session, they felt like they had adjusted to this field? I mean, when, we talk about we haven't had firsthand experience. No other teams have had firsthand experience with this field. What is your assessment of how long it will take to get used to playing on this field?
Oh, I don't know the exact, it wasn't that day, but certainly over a short period of time. So the more you use it, so they played soccer and football on it, and he said just keep using it, and over time, I don't know if it was days or weeks, but they certainly acclimated to it pretty quickly, so much so that, when they went to an opponent, you had all the little crumb rubbery things like, oh, what is this garbage? So, they really come to like it. Their opponents liked it too, so
okay.
It was all positive.
Okay.
And that was just totally unprompted. I just called the guy out of the blue, so I didn't
Yeah.
have a chance to make anything up, so.
Yeah, Kim, and I'll say, so one of the things I heard, so in all honesty, one of the teams I talked to in Arkansas, the football coach loved it, and the soccer coach said, like, yeah, I like it, but like it feels weird walking on it without cleats, and also I feel like my players slip more. And then, so I looked very deeply into this, and so this company has like a center for turf innovation. They like put little things on people. They measure velocities. So it's designed for people to slip more, because one of the ways, especially in women's sports, they get injured is they get lower extremity injuries, because often turf fields with rubber or whatever, they're too grippy, and so they don't release your cleat, and so you snap an ACL or whatever. So he was right. His soccer players probably were slipping more, but that's by design, because again, it's like, it's a wash whether grass or turf or any brand of turf gives you more injuries. It's what type of injury. And so that's one of the things. It's like, it's going to be slippier than if you had a really grippy turf field, but the grippy turf field is injuring a lot of women who, because it's not releasing their cleats and they're tweaking their ACL.
And this guy was happy to report, too, that there were no lower extremity injuries for any of his teams during the course of the year. So that was pretty remarkable. And he said they used a variety of different cleats. They used molded as well as screw-in for the football. And, they injury-free. So, I mean, there's no guarantee that that'll be the case, but that's certainly a good sample size right there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I want to thank you for being open to this, because certainly on this side, the no infill sounds fantastic. And I know, as you said on your side, to try to think of the athletes and, being open to change, a big change. So thank you for.
I think the kids are really excited about leading the way. They are,
great.
the ones that I spoke with. So.
That's really encouraging to hear. Thank you.
Other questions?
David, if there's anything we can do to support in that effort to continue to build buy-in or make the experience once it's installed better for them, please know that this is an open dialogue as we're learning this way too. I just want to be transparent too with the group that when we first started this process, I would not have gone. I think most of the committees, honestly, would not have gone with the one that we chose. But as we learned more about it, and started understanding more of the organic fill and the disadvantages of that, it really kind of became a more clear choice for us. And so I know there's probably people that are anxious about the lack of research or the first ones to do it. And I'll be transparent, I'm nervous about it too. But it really is the amount that the direction that we seem to be going as a society with turf and infill seems to be this direction. And so it's not like we talked about fads earlier. I don't feel like this is a fad. I feel like this is the first of many to come. And so we'll learn a lot from it. I think this is going to be, which I think for the board to know that because only one company does this, it's going to be we have to be kind of it's going to be an interesting bid process, probably one that we haven't had to experience before. But I still think it's the right move. And so I'm really excited. And Jesse really he saw this coming, I think, way before even I did about this product and was really excited about it. And so it's taken me some time. So if it takes any of you guys time or anyone in the public time, or if they have any questions, please reach out. I'm sure during this meeting, we've had 3 or 4 different emails from about it, because that's how frequently we've been getting them. And I get a new test report every single day because Jesse keeps me looped in on these emails about if something is environmentally friendly or passes a PFAS test or whatever. So I just, if anyone has concerns and needs help getting there, or to we had hours of conversations. If they need more context of how we got here, I'm happy to answer that, as I know Jesse is as well.
What about our students? What do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm going to reach out to a lot of the students, the 2 who are on the turf committee, and see what they think. I think a lot of them would be skeptical at first, but it sounds like a lot of them are going to be on board with it, considering the amount of positive feedback. And I'm sure that, a lot of us would be excited to have a more environmentally friendly option. So I'll probably come back to the next meeting with feedback.
You
Great.
can swing a road trip down to Alabama and let people walk on it. That'd be great.
I was pushing the Netherlands,
Yeah,
but
Okay.
in all seriousness, your generation, you're on TikTok and whatever, and so if these French field trips, these excursions, you guys may be able to connect with people, with kids who've played in these fields in the Netherlands and Belgium and Norway. Go for it and let us know, because that's what we lack. We don't lack research. There isn't a lack of research. We just don't have experience in this area with it. So I challenge you to find out.
To get that direct connection, let's see who is the first person to get the direct connection with somebody who's played on the field. It's a fun challenge. Well, I'm very excited to continue this conversation, and just to give the next 2 weeks. Well, these slides are already posted on the turf field subcommittee page. I'd like to make probably some of this recording available with the presentation, just to make sure that people are aware that this is the recommendation on the table, and that at the meeting in 2 weeks we will be voting as the next part of this process. And yeah, I'm just really happy to hear that there is a product that's going to meet these needs. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I note for the record that the school in Illinois, there were two, Centralia, and the other one that I butchered, it's Muscuda High School, for the record.
Great. And it's a high school too, not
Yes.
a college. Great. Thanks. Okay, now we get to move to the items for action. The first the next three are policies. We can take these separately.
I think what I'd like to do is move to approve DJH and DJT together. I think those are the two related to purchasing and contracting and travel costs, and specifically kind of federal awards and federal audit needs. So
Great. So we have a motion on the floor to approve policy DJH and DJT. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Megan. Do you want to just walk? Oh,
Christina.
oh. Are you sure?
I leaned forward, Christina.
Thank you. Do you want to just talk us through these again for a moment, Annika, just to remind us what?
yeah, I can do that. So starting with DJH, Purchasing and Contracting Procurement Staff Code of Conduct. This was updated from 2017 to meet our federal audit requirements. It expands language from quote-unquote employees to staff members, which includes employees, school board members, and their agents. And there's a focus on conflicts of interest, gifts and solicitations, and disclosure requirements. DJT, travel costs in relation to federal awards, is new and also needed to meet our federal audit requirements, and really has to do with ensuring that the travel is necessary, reasonable, documented, and consistent with our other district travel policies, and that if there is any conflict between this policy and other district policies, that it would default to the more restrictive policy. Since the first read, there were a few inconsistencies found just in capitalization, so very minor, but we did capitalize school board in all instances and federal in all instances. So that's one change from last time, or the only changes from last time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Great. All in favor? Great, it was unanimous. Can I have a motion to approve policy JIK, bullying and cyberbullying in schools, as presented?
I am also happy to move to approve policy JICK, bullying and cyberbullying in schools. And I actually am realizing, let me open it up here real quick, because we did have one later item. So
okay, can I get a second?
Second.
You guys did it again. Megan,
mine. That was
thank you.
mine.
Okay. Now you're up, Annika.
Oh, okay, thank you, sorry. Gave me a second to bring it up here anyway. I guess just generally going back to what was presented in first read, really the need here was to add an appeals process. And there were a couple small housekeeping items as well. And then the last piece that has changed, I think I'm just making sure, I'm trying to see, yes, it is changed in the current iteration that is in the folder. So under section 6, responding, letter G, which is the last letter in that section, there was the section read, notify parents, guardians, and students of the right to appeal a decision of a school principal or a superintendent's designee related to taking or not taking disciplinary action in accordance with this policy. The appeals procedure must be consistent with other appeals procedures established by the school board and may include an appeal to the superintendent. That was replaced and expanded upon with the actual appeals section, which comes at the end of the document. So you'll see essentially that same language around the notification requirement, and then it does spell out the process for the appeal in the appeals section. So that was just a kind of late bit of housekeeping to remove that paragraph, and because it is replaced with the appeals section and expanded on there. But certainly if anyone has any questions about that or concerns.
And the appeal section was with the first read. It was just that it was taking out the
correct
the other part.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
great. Okay. And I know a question that has come up recently around the appeals process is which policies the final decision is with the superintendent, which is the case here, versus
Correct.
with the board. And I think, is it mostly to do anything to do with students, the appeal ends with the superintendent for the most part?
There's a couple exceptions. For example, expulsion is obviously a board decision where that can be appealed, but it ultimately is a board decision. But most policies, the superintendent is the decision maker at the end. Yep.
Are there questions?
Can I ask a question which relates to this, but it's more broad? Is there a rule somewhere that when a parent wants to appeal a superintendent decision, that communication needs to be kept between the parent and the superintendent as opposed to the whole board for the privacy of the student?
Yeah, I wouldn't be sharing that. If a parent emails the board, are you meaning when a parent emails the
If a
board?
parent emails the whole board,
Right.
whether they're appealing this or a similar
Yep.
transgression, is there a rule, is it communicated to the parent, you need to be communicating just with the superintendent, not with all of us, because that could complicate the whole procedure?
Yeah, I try to remind parents, I actually did that today, reminding a parent that they should just be communicating with administration. But yeah, I mean, that's up to the parent. It is their choice. And
Okay, so it doesn't.
It doesn't work both ways. It's a parent can put their child's name out if they want to. We just can't on our end.
Okay, and it doesn't legally cloud any action we try to take to help the student
No, it just gets
services
deferred back
if
to the
parent-
administration.
Okay.
Yep.
Broadcasts, okay.
Yep.
Great. All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. You're up, superintendent's report.
All right, superintendent's report. Lots going on. Can't possibly include everything at Mabel I. Wilson School over the last couple of weeks. Veterans Day Assembly. There was 20 veterans, more than 20 veterans actually, that participated in the 2 assemblies at the Wilson School. And there's a photo of half of the school participating, and then they did it again. But really exciting, and I really want to applaud the Wilson School for their recognition of our community's veterans, including, you'll see Don Gray, who is assistant principal at the high school. He's on the center left sitting. Greeley Middle School 4-5, students in STEM. I'm sorry for the blurry photo. I threw it in there, and I realized it was blurry, and then I was like, I got to find the right one. Learning about the engineering design process through collaboration and group activities. Students were challenged to do two different things, building the tallest tower with Kiva blanks, and that ended up being 60 feet. Students also created a model flying machine to assist in getting down a zip line. So these are models of what you would do in order to do that. So this is a pretty common practice in our STEM classes for building and designing, going through the engineering process. 6th through 8th grade band concert. This is the band concert season started, goes in through December, and that was at the GCA recently. 6th graders visited the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. They did hands-on investigations of the changing Gulf of Maine ecosystem. I think we've all heard that the ecosystem is definitely changing. Now we've got great whites. Some people say the great whites have always been in the Gulf of Maine, but we're seeing them more and more, and just kind of the students learning about our backyard and trying to figure out our ecosystem and getting more information. So it was a really great experience for our 6th graders. French immersion trip to Quebec. Obviously the board approved this trip a while ago, and the seniors were able to go on that trip over the Veterans Day holiday, and had the opportunity to travel to Quebec City with their teachers Kim McDonald, Taylor Poulin, and Kevin Donahue. And they had 2 days in Quebec, and they were immersed in French, speaking French, the language, culture, obviously in Canada. And they actually end up going to a sugar shack, I think, on the way back after a workshop at the Plains of Abraham, dancing, singing, eating traditional meals, and having to order in French, which I think was great as part of the immersion experience. And I think that's the, I've stayed there before. What is that? The Hotel de Frontenac. Thank you. I've stayed there once. It's nice. Greeley High School. Students from Mrs. Giantazio's forensics classes were given a hands-on presentation by the Maine National Guard and a tour of the forensic lab truck. This was a really great experience. Mrs. Giantazio teaches, I think, 2 or 3 sections of forensics a year, and it's a semester-long course. And students really get hands-on experiences, and I'm not sure what's going on with the TV. But with forensics. There we go. It might have been just that picture, but there you are. I'd like to give a shout out to Garrett Goldsmith. He's a 5th grade teacher at GMS 4-5. And Garrett was selected to be part of the Educator Outreach Project for Junior Achievement, and I received this card in the mail. From Junior Achievement, just thanking us for sharing Garrett. He actually helped educators statewide on this project for several months, so I want to thank Garrett for his work on that. Obviously the football, I mentioned the soccer at my last report, and you heard them tonight, but football state champions this past weekend, so congratulations. This is the first football state championship that our Greeley team, I believe, has won. I think that's correct, I've been told, in the history of football. And I just threw these pictures in. They might look familiar. So boys and girls state soccer teams were recognized, obviously, by our legislators tonight, and here they were.
Nice work.
Congratulations to Sherry McGinnis. Sherry is also the 2024 Employee of the Year, MSAD 51 Employee of the Year. She was recognized in a standing ovation by all of our staff in June for being selected through this amazing process that we have every year. Just an amazing, fantastic teacher. Found out that she had another hidden accomplishment that was passed on to me by her principal. And it's the 2024 Wasabi Fenway Bowl Honor Roll. And I think she was recognized on the big screen as well. And this is in partnership with a lot of different companies. And they give money to teachers. And I believe Sherry is giving her money to students in the school that she received, is what I understand. So congratulations to Sherry for being named just an amazing teacher.
Can I just say I just met her for the first time today. My son is in her class, and the amount of the ideas that she has, because she was like, I don't want to be bored in class, and so she's always trying for like extra activities. But when I asked her if anything that she needs, she was like, I am in a ridiculously great environment, and I'm so appreciative of it. And so her spirit is just unmatched, unparalleled. We're really lucky to have her.
Very positive.
Yeah.
We have amazing teachers in our district. Amazing. This is Superintendent's notebook. This is just in case somebody was really excited about digging into the strategic priorities. I did do a whole series, eight parts, and this will be posted, and you can click on any one of those, and you can learn more about our strategic priorities, which I know everybody wants to do. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out, that we do, have strategic priorities, and we go through that. And finally, I'd love to put a plug in for substitute teachers. We have filled every long-term bench sub position we have at this point. We have, I believe we have 14 positions, and we have filled them all, which is the first time I can remember us filling them all. But we still need daily substitutes, people who are willing to come in for a day, and you can pick your days. We did have someone call the other day and said, I can only do Fridays. Is that okay? And we were like, yes, Fridays are good.
Oh, we really need Fridays.
Really need you on Fridays. But it's $130 a day. 2+ years of college is the minimum, but you don't need a college degree in order to substitute teach in a school. And we would love to have anybody. You get to have your holidays, your vacations, summers, if you don't want to work. And you can also tell us when you want to work and when you don't want to work. And it's all automated. We call you, and you can say yes, or you can say no, and it's all automated, and it signs you up. So that's our system. But putting the plug in, if you've ever thought about substituting even one day a week, we'd love to have more daily subs on our list. We had a lot more before the pandemic, and we lost a lot of people during the pandemic. Thankfully, the bench subs are great. We have some amazing people, and those are people that are with us 4 or 5 days a week. But we need people who are willing to come in daily, too.
Do they get to choose what they'll sub for? What subject?
Yes,
or?
they can tell. Yep, you can do subject, grade level. You can say, I just want to do pre-K to 3, or just want to do high school. Whatever you want to do. I just want to do Wednesdays. Whatever it is, we will take you.
Great. Thank you.
Yes.
The superintendent support. All right. Now we get to move on to committee reports, and we're going to start with our students.
Okay, so obviously, as we've talked about a bunch, we have 3 state championships, and I know that especially for the girls and boys soccer teams, that was really, really special because they all have really great relationships with each other, and they're all great friends. And of course, with football, I think Mr. Porter's onto something, and that was the first win. And then we have Mamma Mia, and everyone's really excited for that. I'm going to go see that on Saturday, and that'll be awesome. And winter sports are going in full swing, and I know that the chlorine has been an adjustment for me, but I'll get there.
Great, thank you.
Okay. I have to say, I still remember the Gulf of Maine field trip. That was awesome. I don't know how many years ago. I don't know if mine was in 6th grade, but I do remember going, and that was super cool. French field trip, I take French, so I talked to my students, not my students, my peers about it, and they were all really excited for a good portion of the group. It was their first time going outside of the country, so it was a really, really big deal, and they all came back and they were very excited, and they shared what they did, and it seemed like it was really special for them. The seniors also, last week we got, in 5th grade, we write letters to ourselves, and we got them last week, and that was super fun and exciting. I did not write the smartest things in mine. A lot of people were like, I hope you like get into a great college and stuff. And my letter was not that focused, but I did leave a couple quarters in there for myself. So that was nice to open to. And then the IB Art and AP Art students got to go on a field trip to the Maine College of Art and Design, and that was super, super cool. Last year we went to Colby, and I think it's been, as someone who doesn't want to go to school for art, I think it's really nice that we're able to go and still see it. And like, it's just super eye-opening to see all these, like a 5-story building that's just full of art. It was really inspiring. And then today we also had our enrichment for advisory, which is something that was implemented last year, and I think it's been actually going really well. I was a little bit skeptical of it at first, but I think we've all gotten used to it, and we actually really enjoy it now. And I did yoga today with Madame McDonald in this room, and it was really awesome, and I think I might start doing yoga now. So, yeah. Not too many crazy things happening, but
It's quite a different use of the space, right?
it was like, wow. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So now we're going to move to finance. Kim.
The Finance Committee has not met since our last meeting, but I do have some exciting news, and that is that after our last meeting when we spoke about co-op purchasing, Scott went back to the vendor for the
Bobcat.
Thank you. And it's a different program for something like that. It would be called Sourcewell. And because Sourcewell approaches it a different way, where you would have to order and it would have to be shipped to the dealer, it would take a much longer time. Typically, you actually don't end up getting as good a deal. However, Scott brought it up, and they brought the cost down. So instead of $125,000 for the Bobcat, it went down to $112,781. So yes, that is some good news. So thank you, Scott, who is not here this evening. Other than that, as you all know, we were able to hire Christine Girard for the finance manager, and that is very exciting. She is jumping in, especially with the new accounting program. And that is honestly about it that's going on as far as finance committee work. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Kim. Annika, policy.
So we last met on November 14th, and I'm sure you all probably noticed that there were a couple policies that we were thinking of bringing, well, in one case, a first read revision, and in another case, a first read deletion. We are pulling those back for the committee to look at a couple things that came to our attention in late breaking news. So more to come on those soon, I'm sure. And in addition to those and related to those, we've also been talking about our policy related to truancy and related to naming of facilities, and discussion on those continues. So we'll meet next, not until after our next board meeting, but December 12th.
Great. Thank you. That's a good segue into the school building facilities update.
Sure. Jesse, why don't you pull up that presentation? We met last night to talk about the turf options, and we essentially did that presentation. 2 weeks ago, we met as a subcommittee for the mechanicals to talk about HVAC and a little electrical. And we've pushed for Bennett Engineering just to give us a couple more options for comparison, because we know that the committee is really interested, but we know the community as well of different like energy sourcing, just to confirm that we're heading in the right direction. I feel like we are, but it's good to have comparisons. I think we don't have anything on the schedule next, which is quite frightening, but I think we're going to try to meet in the first 2 weeks of December, so we'll get a date out as soon as possible. And that might just be another mechanical subcommittee, because we're really trying to tie that down to get that out. So we will post that. And then something that I'm on the policy committee as well, and we're talking about naming of facilities, and so that we're trying to tie down that policy so that can drive the building committee's kind of subcommittee effort of naming things, because we know we're going to have a lot of opportunities to name things with the new build. So more to come on that as well.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Jesse, artificial turf.
All right, you've heard most of it. So what you haven't already heard, in the background, we're still getting lots of testing data, because I keep asking about testing data for all the various products. So there were slides you didn't even see, because we found out they didn't have total organic fluorine testing, so you didn't need to see those products. So we need to nail down which shock pad we're going to use. All the 3 options you saw meet our PFAS recyclable testing. They're all great. It'll probably come down to which one brings us in on budget. Yeah, and then there's an open question about, do we bid it as one project? Do we split the groundwork out? And there's still an open question related to the co-op about, it's an expensive project, so are there rules that say we can't use the co-op? I say yes, some people say no, and we're still trying to figure out why. But if it's no, we know a representative who can change the law so that we can avail ourselves of the same great pricing that Falmouth and Cape and Scarborough get, so that we are not disadvantaged as an RSU in not being able to use a co-op and get better nationwide bid pricing. So we'll figure it out.
I'll add to that. Today I did ask our legal counsel, who gave us the opinion in the first place. I haven't heard an answer yet because it was later today. Because there's only one vendor that actually manufactures this that we're looking at, is that change things in terms of our ability to, go out to bid, or does it change his legal opinion, basically? So that question's out there. The other thing is, I did get an indication, I shared this with a couple people, that there's a possibility, this is just a possibility, because we're the first district in the Northeast to have this kind of turf. If Pivot is the one the board goes with, there could be a price break from the company. So I don't want to say it too loudly, but there was a conversation with the company, I understand, and they indicated they might be interested in talking about that. So who knows?
We can make some nice marketing videos. So they can, Great, thank you. Curriculum, Christina.
Proving once again, it's always good to ask.
It's always good to ask.
All right, so curriculum. We met on the 18th, and the main focus was the new grade configuration that will be with the new school being built, and it'll affect pre-K to 8th grade. So effectively, Mari made the point that it's really 3 schools that'll be having different, impacts that they need to consider. So it's very early on, but the work is starting on talking to the teachers and staff preferences, looking at the impact on the pilots that are already ongoing, especially ones that are like 4 or 5. What might happen with that going forward. And we also touched on the role of pre-K and the state requirements as they keep emerging with 3-year-olds, and how that will affect the new school and the configurations of the building itself, usage. That was the main focus, and Mari led us through that. And the other thing we just barely touched on, but thought it was worth touching on, was as we head towards strategic planning next year, I did want to assess the feeling around foreign language being returned to the lower grades, and just get people start thinking about that, and as we go towards strategic planning, see what can or what the will is or lack of will around that. So we talked about that too. And our next meeting will be January.
Great. Thanks, Christina. Equity, Kim.
So we met, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, but we did meet, and our big accomplishment, or our big goal, was to separate ourselves into 4 subcommittees to tackle the evaluating the plan and evaluating the 4 buckets of the plan, so to speak. And we came up with some criteria for how to evaluate that and what some of our priorities might be. So I'm excited that we are now
engaging in that. We also decided to go to a bi-monthly schedule instead of monthly. So we're hoping that the subcommittees will be able to get a little more work in between meetings. So I'm going to be touching base with each of the subcommittees and kind of seeing what that's going to look like.
Great. Thanks, Kim. And then we have our ad hoc committee reports. I know, Tim, do you have one from Rec?
Yeah, I met with the Rec last week, and we essentially talked about like the success of the fall sports and how it's amazing how much is going on from a community standpoint. And basketball, it looks like they're going to be able to get everyone that they need to serve. So I mean, people are coming off the waiting list as we speak, and so that's really kind of coming around. And we've had kind of great success between the cross. They were really appreciative of a lot of the communication between the two parties, between us and them. I think there was a challenge around some scheduling around some of the soccer stuff and cross country, but overall we're getting more of a budgetary review next meeting. So
great, thanks. Other ad hoc committees?
Oh, I'll just put in a quick plug for PTO has a Greeley gear holiday sale only through tomorrow. So get your Greeley gear if you want.
Okay.
Is it online too?
Yeah. Yes, I think it's exclusively online. I just looked on the Facebook page, and you could find them on other
Good for
social media
holiday
or on their
gifts.
website, or I'm sure that they have links everywhere.
Great, thanks. And I was also asked to share the Greeley Hockey Turkey Trot is this coming Thursday, Thanksgiving. So just a reminder, it's open for signups. Fun way to start the day before you eat all your pie. So I know I'll be there. Hopefully, and we usually see some school board members. So that sign up is open, and it supports our hockey boosters. Any other updates?
Safety and security and wellness meet again in December. So we'll probably have some updates after that.
Great. Okay. Anything else? All right. I think I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Great. Thanks, Megan. Second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Kim. All in favor? Awesome. Unanimous. Great. Have a nice evening. And before 8:30. Wow.